we're going to start off the very beginning inside. We're going to go mostly outside of the text, but let's start at the beginning and see how we go. So Ve'ela Toldos, this week is Pashas Toldos. Toldos, it's mostly translated as generations. I don't know if maybe offspring is a better word. Tulda is an offspring, Toldos. Anyways, in terms of the context, it's definitely one of the additional meanings that the word has. So the parasha starts off telling us, Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, these are the generations, the offspring of Yitzchak, son of Abraham. We've been talking about Avram in the parasha mostly recently, and then so it says, Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, these are the generations or the offspring of Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. Avraham holid es Yitzchak. Avraham holid, the technical literal translation in Hebrew would be made be born, probably. I.e., he is the father of Yitzchak. He is the one who did the male component of making Yitzchak be born. I wouldn't say that he bore Yitzchak, because that would probably be attributed more largely to Sarah than to Avram, but he did his part in contributing to the birth of Yitzchak. So that, I guess that's the male equivalent of giving birth. That's what he did. Now we have here something that seems to be very redundant. It says, these are the offspring, the generations of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. Avraham gave rise to the birth of Yitzchak. Now, they're technically two separate statements, but either one implies the other. If Yitzchak is the son of Avram, then that means that Avram fathered, maybe that's a good word, Avram fathered Yitzchak. If Avram fathered Yitzchak, then Yitzchak is Avraham's son. So why does it say these are the offspring of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham? Avraham fathered Yitzchak. Now, so let's continue inside. Shekefa lashon hakosov ubiru chazal. So the sages explain Shekefa lashon hakosov balalamdeinu. The reason that the pasuk says this, what seems to be redundant, this second redundant statement that Avraham fathered Yitzchak, if it already tells us that if Yitzchak is described as the son of Avraham, we know that Avraham fathered Yitzchak. So it came to emphasize, to teach us and emphasize, Yitzchak ben Avram, in addition to the fact that Yitzchak was the son of Avraham, Haya mudgesh asher Avram holid es Yitzchak. The reality was that the fact that Avraham fathered Yitzchak was emphasized, ki haya domel Avram b'klasta upon of Yitzchak had a very, very strong facial visual resemblance to Avraham. And it was very readily evident when anyone looked at Yitzchak's face, they saw, oh, Avram fathered Yitzchak. That's where Yitzchak comes from. Why? And Hashem did this specifically. So there was this period of time when Sarah was living with Avimelech, living literally, not figuratively. The Torah tells us that Avimelech didn't touch her and he didn't treat her inappropriately, but she was living with him. He was the king of Pelishtim. So Sarah was literally living with him. And so people, the Torah tells us that there was no intimacy between them, but, people on the street don't know that. And as you can imagine, word on the street gets around and people are going to talk. And so people would say, well, look, Sarah was 90 years old when Yitzchak was conceived. So Sarah had been married to Avram for decades and never got pregnant. All of a sudden, she's living with Avimelech for a short amount of time, boom, she gets pregnant. What are the chances that after living with Avram for decades, she never got pregnant, and now she just happened to get pregnant from Avram right about the time she happened to live in the same house as a different guy? It seems pretty suspicious. And you could imagine why word would get around on the street that genetically and biologically, Yitzchak was actually Avimelech's son, not Avram's son. So you could almost not blame people for thinking that and for the rumor to get around like that. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tzar klas tapanav shel Yitzchak doimel Avram. Hashem made sure that Yitzchak should have a very distinct visual facial resemblance to Avram, so that people looked and it was like, no, yeah, you could think that, but it's clearly not the case, because he looks, he's a dead ringer of Avram, of who is clearly now biologically his father. So that's why the Pasuk adds the word. It says, these are the generations of the offspring of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. And then it adds, and by the way, you should know that Avraham fathered Yitzchak. In brackets, not Avimelech. And it was very clear and it was plain for all to see. So that's why the Pasuk adds that second phrase that seems to be redundant, but it's not redundant because it's telling us something that's very important. Question?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, okay. So now, so the Mefarshim, the commentaries have already asked, Inyan Zeh, this idea, Bitul Divrei Leitzoni Hador, the fact that the Pasuk comes, the Torah comes and tells us, you should know that Yitzchak had a very strong visual facial resemblance to Avram in order to invalidate the claim that his biological father was actually Avimelech. It should have told us this way back. We already know about Yitzchak having been born. Right? Yitzchak was born way back in the Torah. So the Torah should have told us, or it seems that the Torah should have told us that Sarah got pregnant, she bore this child, Yitzchak was born, they named him Yitzchak, and he looked like Avram. That's where it would have made most sense. If that's the reason it's telling us, it would have made most sense to tell us around about the time when the Torah tells us that Yitzchak was born. Why did the Torah allow all this time to pass? The story, and we've had, the story of Akedas Yitzchak and Yitzchak being offered up or close to it as a sacrifice, etc., etc. All of that time, the Torah never bothered to tell us. Now, all of a sudden, Parshas told us, it tells us that Yitzchak looked like Avram, and it was readily evident that Avram fathered Yitzchak. So, that well, not, I would say, the answer, but the reason why this is the case, at least the first part of that, is because up until now, we've heard about Yitzchak. We heard about Yitzchak being born, but we heard about Yitzchak being born in the context of the story of Avram and Sarah. The Torah was telling us about Avram and Sarah. And in their story, obviously a very big part of their story was Yitzchak being born after decades of them being childless together. So that's where we hear about Yitzchak being born. The story and everything the Torah has told us up until this point is more or less in the context of the bigger story of the family, of Yitzchak as part of the family of Avram and Sarah. Even last week's Parsha, which doesn't necessarily seem to be, that doesn't seem that that's the case so strongly, but it's still, the Parsha is Chaye Sarah. It's the story about the follow-up to the passing of Sarah. So everything that happened in last week's Parsha is still to a degree in the context of Sarah's story. The name of last week's Parsha was The Life of Sarah. So it's talking about the follow-up from the culmination of the life of Sarah. This week is really the one Parsha. Next week's Parsha is Vayetze, which is already Yaakov's story. Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva, and it's talking about Yaakov, and Yaakov has, Parshas, and his story is very big and colorful. This week is really the one Parsha that's dedicated to Yitzchak. This is the Parsha that is about Yitzchak's story. That's this week's Parsha. Ele Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. This is the Torah portion that talks about the offspring and the story of Yitzchak. And some of the commentaries actually on this verse, on this week's Parsha, the beginning of the Parsha, translate, and this is why I chose to point out the literal translation of the word Toldos as offspring, because it's not just about his biological offspring, i.e. his actual children. It's about his offspring in terms of his legacy, about his deeds, about the life that he lived, the things that he generated. Offspring is that which we generate. This is the story of Yitzchak's life. It's a story of that which Yitzchak generated. Yitzchak generated biological human children. He also generated a legacy. He generated a lifetime of good deeds and contribution. This is all part of Toldos. It's all his offspring. It's that which he generated. Now, the reason that the Torah told us, by the way, Avraham fathered Yitzchak, Yitzchak has this very strong resemblance to Avram. It tells us in this week's Parsha, not back when he was born. even though in terms of the actual story at face value, that would have been the best place to tell us that, is because Yitzchak's resemblance to Avram goes very deep. Goes very deep, and it is very important and relevant to Yitzchak's legacy, to Yitzchak's life, to the life of good deeds and contribution that Yitzchak lived. And we're going to get into how and why. So the Torah tells us in this week's Parsha, the beginning of this week's Parsha, which is the one Torah portion that's dedicated to the life, the contribution, the deeds, the legacy of Yitzchak specifically, not in the context of Avram and Sarah's life, not in the context of Yaakov's life. This week's dedicated to Yitzchak himself, to his life story and his legacy. In this week's Torah portion, the Torah tells us about Yitzchak and the life that he lived, that Yitzchak resembled Avram. That's why the Torah is telling us about it this week. Now, I want to talk about and get into what we might call the general theme, the thematic difference in terms of the lives that they lived between Avram and Yitzchak. Obviously, the difference between their lives is incountable, and they're uncountable, whatever it is, whatever the right word is. And there'd be infinite number of things we could mention that are different about their lives. But I want to talk about a thematic difference between their lives and the way that they lived. Now, in Pnimius HaTorah, in the mystical texts of the Torah, Kabbalah, Chassidus, it talks about, we know that there's a lot of talk about spheros and koichos, and we know there's Chachma bin Adas, which are the intellectual spheros / koichos, depending on the context. When you talk about an olam, a world, a reality, there are spheros, there are 10 spheros. When you talk about an individual, a person, a nefesh, a soul, then it's not spheros, it's koichos. These are abilities that the soul has. But they're equivalent, and the 10 koichos of the nefesh are equivalent to the 10 spheros in a reality, which is why they have the same names, because they're functionally equivalent. The chachma in a nefesh, the koyach of chachma in a nefesh, is functionally equivalent to the sphera of chachma in an olam. So we have Chachma bin Adas, which are the intellectual ones. I would call them probably conception, comprehension, and connection. And then we have Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus, which are referred to generally as midos. They're the more emotional or personal elements. And the three that we tend to focus on the most for a number of reasons are Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes. And a lot of times the way that it's illustrated or mapped out is that we have Chesed on one side, we have Gvura on the other side, and then we have Tiferes down here. No, that's not very symmetrical. Tiferes down here. And then there's Netzach is over here, Yesod, Netzach Hod is over here, Yesod, and then Malchus. So it's kind of, what it would look like if you mapped it out would be something like this. And it's kind of, and then you have that, and then there's all kinds of crisscrossing lines going everywhere. But we're going to focus on the Chesed and Gvura, not even Tiferes so much, but I'll leave it in there because we're talking about the Avos. So, Minas HaChesed is primarily associated with Avram. Yitzchak is associated with Gvura, and we're going to talk about what this means, so don't worry about it if it seems abstract and vague. And Tiferes is Yaakov. So we are going to talk primarily today about Chesed and Gvura, Avram and Yitzchak. Now, Chesed is generally translated as kindness. Gvura is translated as strength. Now, Chesed and Gvura, or let's call it the right and the left. Right now, Chesed's on the right, Gvura's on the left. It actually says in the introduction to Tikkunei Zohar, and we say it on Erev Shabbos before Mincha, it says Chesed Droya Mina. Chesed is the right arm. The sphere of Chesed is the right arm of the Creator. Hashem Gvura Droya Smola, the left arm. So the division of right and left is important because they are to a degree opposite. And then Yaakov comes and mixes the two together, which is where you get to Tiferes. It's a separate story. But Chesed and Gvura are kindness versus strength, are not the totality of what it's about. They are instances of this theme of right versus left. So if we're going to talk about what they are more broadly, the right side would be, maybe we could call it openness. I'm not sure, because I don't think closed is the right word here. So I don't know what the right word for be, but we'll talk about it. So chesed is, its kindness is associated with giving. It's also associated in terms of our disposition towards Hashem or towards an individual or an entity of any sort, would be ahava, love. So ahava is associated with chesed, and that's all part of this right side, this theme over here. So you have open, we have giving, we have love.
Relation with chesed.
Yeah, this is all associated with chesed. And that's what Avram is primarily associated with in terms of the midos. So Avram's neshama, Avram's soul, had a very strong connection to this idea of chesed. And Avram's soul was was very deeply connected to this idea of chesed. And you see the stories that we have about Avram from the Midrashim. Avram had this huge open house, tent, and he would invite people in and he would give people food and drink, and Avram was always being kind and taking care of people. So Avram's chesed. Yitzchak is associated with gvura. Now gvura is strength. We think of it as being the opposite of chesed, which is kind, but it's not really, because the opposite of being kind is being mean. Maybe. I don't know if that's technically. If you want to get really technical about the opposite of kindness, it may not be. But what people generally think of is you have a person who's kind and you have a person who's mean. Yitzchak's not mean. Gvura is not mean. Gvura is one of Hashem's midos. It's one of Hashem's attributes. Hashem's not mean. Even if it can feel like that sometimes. It's not the case. So the opposite theme to the open, giving, loving category of things that's associated with chesed is this strong, disciplined, demanding approach, which is associated with gevura, which is strength. Now, it's very interesting because we don't see a whole lot in the Torah openly about Yitzchak being particularly strong, strict, etc. For Avram, we have examples galore of the chesed. Also, it's love, and there's a pasuk that Hashem refers to Avram as Avram Oihavi. Avraham, the one who loves me. That's ahava. That's open. It's an open emotion. About Yitzchak, Hashem says, the Torah refers to, in the context of the least of Yitzchak, says pachad Yitzchak, the fear, the awe of Hashem, A-W-E. The awe of Hashem, this fear of Hashem. That's associated with gvura, with strength, with discipline, with demandingness. Yitzchak's not mean. Gvura is not about being mean. It's about being... Restraint is definitely a good word. It's demanding. Restraint is good. There's definitely going to be some strength in there, which is literally what gvura means. It means strength. Now, what's it's very interesting, the sort of textual basis for this idea of Yitzchak being associated with Midas Gvura. The thing that it mentions all the time in the text is like Yitzchak's associated with Gvura because Yitzchak dug wells. Hey? Connection between being strict and strong and demanding and digging wells. It actually is very strongly connected. What did Avram do? If you come to Avram and you say, Avram Avinu, I'm thirsty, what does Avram do? He says, here's a cup, here's some water, make a bracha and drink. That's kindness. Avram's open, giving. You're thirsty? Here, let me provide you with a drink. Yitzchak says, you're thirsty? Okay, there's plenty of water available. Here's a shovel, start digging. Which is demanding, it's strong, but which of the people is going to still not be thirsty tomorrow? The one who got a drink from Avram Avinu yesterday, or the one who dug the well? The one who dug the well. So it's not being mean, it's strong, it's demanding, it demands discipline, but it's not mean. It's the opposite of the giving. It's an approach that's not as open. It's not just open giving. It's an approach that's demanding. It's strong. But it's not mean. It's equally good. It's a different approach to goodness. So Yitzchak dug wells. Yitzchak was gvura, was that strong, demanding approach. Now,
He dug the wells or he taught people how to dig the wells?
both. But his general approach to drinking, let's say, was digging wells. So, this is generally speaking the approaches of Avram versus Yitzchak. Avram is about this, and that's why Avram, which is about open kindness, his primary disposition towards Hashem, or his relationship with Hashem was primarily associated with love. Avas Hashem, Avram Oihavi. Yitzchak's relationship with Hashem was primarily founded in what we call Yiras Hashem, Yiras Shamayim, fear or awe of Hashem. Now, when we talk about being afraid of Hashem, it's not, afraid isn't quite the right word, which is why awe, A-W-E, is a much better word. I would say it's that which is behind the respect. But yes, respect would be a very good example of an outcome of being in awe of Hashem. So it's not like, oh, I'm scared Hashem's going to do something mean to me. Not to say that Hashem can't or won't. And not to say that actually quite literally being afraid of Hashem is a bad thing, as long as it's done in a healthy way.
This is it.
Yeah. Or this is Yiras Shamayim, Yiras Hashem, fear of Hashem, which is associated with Gvura and with the Yitzchak, the strength side of things. But it's being in awe of something that is so much greater than ourselves, so much. Yitzchak recognized the degree to which he was so insignificant relative to Hashem, and in the presence of Hashem, he was just in awe of Hashem. Had this fear. Fear is, it's kind of seems like a very shallow word relative to what it means, but that's what yira literally generally is translated as, yira, an awe. It's being in awe of Hashem. So Avram's relationship with Hashem was primarily associated with chesed, love. Avram's personal daily life was a chesed approach to life and to dealing with people. That translated to the fact that his relationship with Hashem was primarily an equally open relationship, a relationship of love. Yitzchak's relationship with people and his approach to life was one of discipline, demanding, strength. And in terms of his relationship with Hashem, it was also associated with that smell, with that left sort of approach, which was more about the awe of Hashem than the love of Hashem. So this is generally speaking. We talk about Avram being chesed and avas Hashem, Yitzchak being gvura and yiras Hashem. Kindness and love versus strength and fear, strength and awe. And this week's parsha is about Yitzchak's story. It's about the life that Yitzchak lived. Yitzchak lived a life that was associated with gvura, with strength, with demand, with discipline. But the Torah comes along and tells us it's very important to know that Yitzchak's gvura, Yiras Hashem life that he lived still had a very strong component of the Avram category, of the openness, of Avas Hashem, of simcha, of joy. Yitzchak's name is tzchok, laughter. Laughter is something you would have definitely associated with the open, loving, giving, kindness category of things rather than the demanding, strong, strict side of things. His name was Yitzchak, was laughter. So Yitzchak, although Yitzchak's life was primarily associated with gvura, with the strong, demanding side of things, that category, there still is a very real and important component of his life in terms of the chesed, open, giving, loving category. And that's exemplified and plays out in the fact that he's named after laughter, after joy.
But Gevura is the opposite of Hesed.
Correct.
So if Yitzhak is connected with Gevura, how can he's connected as well to Hesed, like opening, giving, and...
It's a good question. We're going to get there.
Okay.
So let's see if there's a bit of a text that we should jump into.
But you say that the Gevura of Yitzhak is connected with open, giving, and love? Or no?
I didn't say that yet. what I said is, so far, despite the fact that Yitzchak is primarily about Gvura, he also has a lot of Avram's chesed in his life, which is why the Torah says, these are toldos, the offspring, the legacy, that which was generated in the life of Yitzchak. Avram Holides Yitzchak. Yitzchak's life, despite being a Gvura life, a life of demanding and discipline, etc., and awe, still had a very deep and strong and important resemblance to Avram's life. It still had that strong resemblance to chesed, openness, etc., to the degree that you could actually see it. So it's not just like, because that's the whole idea that it's telling us, right? Avram Holides Yitzchak, it was readily apparent. That's like the words in parentheses here. It was readily apparent that Avram fathered Yitzchak because there was a strong resemblance. This is true both visually in terms of their faces and in terms of their lives, their approaches. Despite the fact that Yitzchak was Gvura, which is in a largely opposite of Chesed, still there was a strong enough resemblance to Avram's Chesed in Yitzchak's life to the degree that it was readily apparent you could see that resemblance. So on one hand, you could see Yitzchak was this Gvura, strong, demanding, strict, disciplined approach to life, but you could still, it was readily apparent, you could see that chesed element from Avram. You could see that Avram fathered Yitzchak, that chesed, open, loving, laughing element was still readily apparent in Yitzchak's life.
What's the name Yitzchak means? You said
Laughter.
laughter.
Okay, so let's go inside for a little. Let's go to Daled in the Hebrew. It's page 105, about a third of the way down the right column. So v'yesh lo mahabir bazeh. We could say that the explanation to this is me'achalukim shebein ava midasa shel Avram liyira midasa shel Yitzchak. Among the differences between ava, love, which was Avram's primary aspect or element in Avram's relationship with Hashem, versus Yira, the primary element of Yitzchak's relationship with Hashem. In Yona Shel Ava, love is about hukirav elanav. It's feeling close. When you love someone, you feel close to them. You feel a closeness, a connection to them, a proximity. When you love someone, you don't feel your sense of independent identity doesn't become any less. If anything, it gets reinforced. It's like, I love this person. Emphasis on I. I love this person because the love is something that I feel. So loving someone is, to a degree and in some ways, largely about ourselves more than it is about the person that we love. Masha'enken yira, awe, on the other hand, being in awe or in fear, in Yonasha Adam is battle ma'abet tokfo mitziyusay klapezesha yirimimena. When you're in awe of someone, if you're in a situation where you're really truly in awe of something, you to a degree can lose your sense of self. If it's really extreme, you could almost forget that you're there. It's just you become overwhelmed by being in awe of something greater. So, Ava and Yira, if we go deeper into the place in the person that it comes from, or what's happening in a person when they're feeling love versus awe, they're also opposites, because love is very much about, I love this person. I feel a connection to this person. I feel a desire to be close to this person. Or, it's not about me, fear. It's about the thing that I'm in awe of. And when we're really in awe of something, our sense of independent significance becomes less. And if it's a really extreme case, we could almost lose sense of the fact that we're even there. We just become overwhelmed by this awe. So they're very opposite all the way deep down. very quickly, we're going to speed through the next little bit just outside the text. And examples of the difference between this would be and this is talked about extensively in various texts, is of the relationship between a son and a father versus a relationship between an eved, a servant, and a master. So a son loves his father, and you would assume that the connection between a son and a father, or the connection between that a man has with his son versus with his servant, you would think that the son's connection would be far greater than the servant's connection. And it definitely will be, practically speaking, largely. But the son's connection to the father still is, I love you. It's what I feel about you. The servant's connection to the master, while it feels less in the personal level, it's actually more about the master than the son's relationship is about the father, because the son's relationship is, I love you, I want to be close to you. It's about me, it's about the feelings that I have, and therefore the things that I want as a result of those feelings. The servant's relationship with that same man who is not his father but it's his master is, I do what you say. Now, it's a relatively superficial example, at least at face value, and we could get really deeply into it. But whilst on one hand, the connection that the slave has with this person is much less than the connection that his son has with him, his connection is actually much more about the father than the son's is, because the slave's connection is, it's about you. This is about what you want. This is about what you tell me to do. Which means that to some degree, the son is more likely to resemble the father visually, emotionally, intellectually. A lot of times you can, sometimes in a really extreme case, you meet someone and there's just, you see, and if it's someone that this is very distinctive about, maybe it's the mannerisms, the way they talk, the way they think. Sometimes there are some people that you look at them and you can almost see the gears turning in their head where they think. And if you have an extreme case of that, you see a person's train of thought and the way they think. And sometimes you can almost guess who that person may be related to if you know a sibling or a parent, and you just be like, that so reminds me of someone. And there could be cases where you'll actually correctly guess who the sibling or the parent is because that connection's so strong and the resemblance is so strong. But at the end of the day, as similar as they may be, and as much as a son should love his father, his love towards his father is about him. So the connection, as much as it's going to be bigger and stronger, both at face value and internally, largely, in some ways, at least conceptually, the strength of the connection is less. The strength of the connection that the slave has to the master, in some ways, conceptually, is deeper and stronger, because the slave's doing something for the master. Everything that the slave does is not about him, it's about the master, because the master said so.
The opposite, so. Or the relation is someone with the master is opposite the relation that the son with the father.
To a degree, yeah.
No, I mean, not degree, I mean, when the son of his father comes from the son.
Correct. Exactly.
The master and the servant comes from the
Correct.
master. Okay.
So the focus of the son's love is the son and his love. The focus of the servant's awe is the master. So in some ways, the connection to the master is actually deeper, at least conceptually, with the servant than it is with the son, because it's about the master. And the servant is more likely to be in awe of the master than to feel a love, and the son is vice versa. Now, let's go to Hey. Left column halfway down, almost halfway down, left column on page 105. When it comes to bittul means, it's translated as nullification. Again, I don't love it. I would say it's a lack of independent significance. It's a lack of feeling independently significant. Now, it's not a lack of feeling significant, but it's a lack of feeling independently significant or significantly independent. Probably both are true, actually. It's a lack of I am me and I exist in and of myself, for myself, about myself. Bittul is I am part of something bigger. Bittul doesn't mean I'm not aware that I'm here. Bittul doesn't mean don't believe that I'm capable or valuable. Bittul means that the capabilities that I have and the value that I have are part of a bigger picture, part of something greater than myself, ultimately a part of infinity, a part of the Creator. That's what Bittul is about. When it comes to Bittul, now the fact is that a big part of Bittul is, and the process of achieving Bittul is recognizing how insignificant and nothing we are relative to the Creator, relative to infinity, relative to Hashem. That's what it's about. Now, in the process of, getting to a state where we can both recognize our strengths and our inherent value while seeing it as part of something bigger, that's very, very, very much easier said than done. To be able to get to a point where we have that real, healthy, balanced perspective, that's a lifetime of work to get to. And a big part of that is because, I talk about this a lot. Rambam talks about it in terms of personal development generally. If I know that I have a general tendency, let's say that I have a general tendency to be overly stingy or overly generous to a degree that's not healthy. Generosity can get to a point where it's unhealthy, right? I give away everything and I don't have anything left to buy myself and my family food because I'm giving charity to the whole world. Generosity is nice, but that's not healthy generosity. So Rambam says, if you have a generosity problem, where do you want to be? Your goal is not to have a stinginess problem. Your goal is to get to the middle path where you have a healthy balance of generosity that's not out of control. The way that you get there isn't to strive for generosity that's under control. The way that you get there, because you have a generosity problem, the way you get there is to practice the opposite extreme for a period of time, to practice extreme frugalness, I don't like the word stinginess because stingy is negative, but extreme frugalness. And because if I'm a person who has a generosity problem, practicing extreme frugalness will help compensate and train me in the skills of frugalness to the point that I should then be able to learn those skills and learn the value of frugalness and then be able to incorporate frugalness in a healthy way into my generosity and end up in the middle. Right? Now, in terms of interpersonal interactions and relationships, naturally, we talk about always putting people before ourselves. In a relationship, you always put the other person first and you value the person more than yourself. If we take that literally to the extreme degree, that can get very unhealthy. It's not healthy to be in a relationship where your whole entire emphasis is on the other person to a degree that your needs are not met. That's not something to strive for. You don't strive for a relationship in which you're so focused on the other person and your needs are not met. Aside from the fact that practically it's not going to be sustainable, it's not healthy or positive. It's not a good thing. That being said, because naturally we are biologically wired to care about ourselves first and foremost, that's the way that we're supposed to be because that's the way that we survive, by worrying about ourselves first and foremost and putting ourselves before everyone and everything else. And immediate family, children, especially biologically, comes together with that because the reason we want to survive biologically is to procreate and to contribute towards the continuation of our species, which means that caring for our children is biologically wired in as much as caring for ourselves. But generally speaking, we care about ourselves more than we care about other people and before we care about other people. Which means that if we want to be in a healthy relationship with other people, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a friend, whether it's someone that we care for, and it's a vertical relationship in which we are the caregiver and the provider, if we want to get to a point where there's a healthy balance and we're really giving and open and we value the other person and their needs to a degree that we should in a healthy relationship, the way to get there is start first to focus on putting others before ourselves to an extreme degree, at least in terms of the way that we think about it. If we think, okay, I must put that person before myself 100%, that's my mission right now. When we do that and we think that way, for a period of time, as part of a process of learning that balance, we can end up in a place where we really do, and this is particularly important, in a deeply personal and intimate relationship, where we can value and really value that other person's needs as much as we value our own, because that's what partnership's about. But the way to get there is not to strive to value their needs as much as we value our own, because we're going to approach that and never get there. If we at least, in a sort of gamify it by aspiring to put their needs before our own, we can end up in this sort of healthy balance where we value their needs as much as our own. Now, the reason I'm bringing that in is because when it comes to yira, to bittul, bittul is associated with yira. Why would I be so in awe of Hashem? I recognize the magnitude of what the Creator is, and I feel entirely insignificant in the face of the Creator. I'm going to be in awe of the Creator. I'm also going to feel independently insignificant. I'm nothing relative to the Creator, which is true. So the yira, the fear, goes very much together with the bittul, that feeling of insignificance, let's call it. That being said, despite the fact that I am insignificant relative to the Creator and we are in the Creator's presence, which effectively means we're always insignificant, that Creator put us here, and that Creator decided that each of us needs to be here, which means that we are very significant and we're very important. Now, the ultimate perspective is one in which we recognize that we are important, we are capable, we need to be here, we're valuable, and that is in the context of something bigger. We are part of infinity. We're part of this picture which revolves around the Creator. In order to get there, because it's very unnatural, we naturally think about ourselves, and we are naturally self-centered, and we naturally tend to think highly of ourselves, generally speaking. The way to temper that, to be able to move towards this balanced approach, is to oppose it. And it takes a lot of work to fight that inherent natural sense of, I am the most important, the world revolves around me. Right? That's the way you look at a 2 or 3-year-old, you will observe that trait very clearly. The world revolves around me. And that's natural. You don't get angry. You can, and it's natural to get angry, but if you stop and try to be present and think about it, it's not a reason to get angry at a 2 or 3-year-old. It's a reason to work, to train them, to educate them, so as they grow older, they will realize, no, the world doesn't revolve around me. But it's natural. We are biologically designed to experience the world in a way that revolves around us. And to break out of that, we need to work very hard. No, the world doesn't revolve around me. No, I'm not the most important thing in the world. Everyone else is equally or more important than me. The purpose is more important than me. The Creator is more important than me. And really work on that, not because we want to end up in a place where we don't feel a value or sense of self-worth, because that's not a positive thing. We want to get to a place where we have a balanced sense of self-worth in the context of that which is bigger. But to get there, we have to work very hard on negating this innate, natural sense of the world revolves around me and I'm the most important. So that's what bittul is. Bittul, but because the work of approaching bittul, of working on feeling not the most important and not the world, in order to not feel like I'm the most important, the world revolves around me, etc., we have to actively fight that, because it's a very strong feeling that we have naturally. It's also relatively common and natural for us to go too far in that fight and to end up actually losing our sense of self-worth, which is not healthy and positive. We don't want to end up there. And so Yitzchak is about gvura, demanding that there's a recognition of the bigger picture. There's a recognition of where I am in the context of everything that exists. Demanding work. Demanding if you're thirsty, dig a well. Demanding if you want to get somewhere, put in the work to get there. Demanding, and that approach is going to generally be associated with having a relationship with Hashem that's more associated with yira, with awe. Because that it comes from the same part of the nefesh. It's the same sort of category. It's not the same thing. But people who are going to be strict and demanding are going to tend to be people who are more likely to feel primarily and naturally an awe towards Hashem, rather than a relationship with Hashem that's primary love, which is going to be a chesed person, an open, giving, loving, kind person. So yes, Yitzchak's gvura, yes, Yitzchak is demanding and strength. It's fear of Hashem, it's awe, it's bittul, it's a recognition of the fact that I am insignificant in the face of the bigger picture. But the point of that is not to feel insignificant. The point of that is to have an accurate context and to understand what we're a part of and to understand the contribution that we can make to the world. The point of yira is not just to be in awe. The point of being in awe is that if we're in awe of that which is infinite, that which is greater than ourselves, and we are in awe of that which we are a part of, that ultimately will lead us to the greatest joy of all. If we are in awe of Hashem, we're in awe of infinity. We're in awe of the infinite purpose that the universe has. We're in awe of the infinity of the Creator. And with time we get to a place, or ultimately where it's healthy and balanced. Not that we feel that therefore we're worthless, because there's no reason to feel that you're worthless just because you're in awe of something and you feel like relative to infinity we're nothing. Because infinity put us here, and infinity wants us to be here, or we wouldn't be here. And that ultimately will lead to the greatest joy, to the joy of being a part of infinity, to the joy of playing a role in this infinite purpose of existence. So the yira and the bittul doesn't mean not feeling like we have self-worth or value or purpose. Bittul means recognizing our relative insignificance in the bigger picture, which ultimately brings us greater joy and greater motivation because it makes us appreciate that which we're a part of and the opportunity that we have. And that's why Yitzchak, who was yira, who was fear and awe and bittul, his name was Yitzchak, his name was laughter. Because when you would look at Yitzchak, because Yitzchak had this foundation of awe, of respect for that which he was a part of, this recognition of the infinity relative to which he was entirely insignificant and nothing, that, because it was done in the right and healthy way, that led to him being Avram Holides Yitzchak. You look at Yitzchak, who's this gvura, demanding fear kind of guy, and you also see that he has Avram Holides Yitzchak. He has that resemblance to Avram, to the chesed, joy, open, loving characteristics of Avram. And you could see it in Yitzchak because Yitzchak was primarily about the building and the foundation of awe. Awe isn't supposed to, bittul and fear of Hashem, awe of Hashem are not supposed to lead to a life of feeling depressed and irrelevant and useless. God forbid. It's there to bring us to a real appreciation of the bigger picture, which ultimately should bring us the greatest joy of all. So when you look at Yitzchak, who is about gvura and fear and demanding and awe, you would see that resemblance to Avram. You would see right away it was undisputable that Avram Holides Yitzchak, Avram fathered Yitzchak. You see the chesed, you see the joy to the degree that that was his name. His name was Yitzchak, was laughter. And you see many, many references throughout the Torah between Yitzchak and his association with Avram at this deeper level, and laughter and joy, etc. Because the purpose of awe and the purpose of bittul, the purpose of feeling insignificant relative to the bigger picture, is not to feel insignificant. It's to have an accurate perspective. And the accurate perspective is that in absolute terms, relative to Hashem, relative to infinity, we are nothing. We are insignificant. But that infinity relative to which we are insignificant also decided that we need to be here and bothered to create each of us individually the way we are, which means we have something that we can contribute. There's a difference that each of us can make today that is important enough to infinity for infinity to bother putting us here and making us get out of bed in the morning. So it's the recognition of our insignificance in the face of infinity which will lead immediately to awe, to fear, to a feeling of insignificance, which will ultimately lead to the greatest joy and the greatest valuation of our skills. Because I'll say, well, if Hashem, if infinity put me here for a reason, what might that reason be? What are the things that I can really do to make a difference? What are the things that I'm predisposed to be most effective at doing? Every one of us has gifts. Every one of us has things that we're really good at and things that we can make real changes in because we're better than most. And, some people have maybe a whole range, and we're all different. We all have gifts and we all have things that we're good at and contributions that we are uniquely predisposed to make better than others. That's why we're here. If that wasn't the case, we wouldn't be here. So the fact that we're here is evidence of the fact that the universe needs us, that there's something that Hashem, that Klal Yisroel, that the world needs from us. So just the fact that we are insignificant relative to Hashem actually would magnify that joy, because that Hashem relative to what we're insignificant to, I don't think that two belong there, but never mind. The Hashem relative to who we are insignificant wants us to be here, which means that our abilities are important, our unique characteristics are important, our strengths are important. Our health is important. Our achievement is important. It matters to Hashem, because if it didn't, we wouldn't be here. So the awe and the sense of bittul, of insignificance, ultimately will lead to the greatest joy of all. So Yitzchak having the yira, the pachad, the fear, that strength and recognition, and awe, fear, bittul, insignificance, leads to looking at him and saying, yes, Havram hoilides Yitzchak. Yitzchak has that ava, that love for Hashem, and that joy to the degree that he's named Yitzchak, laughter. Because that's the point of the bittul. The point of the year and the bittul is to get to the greatest ava and joy and sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in life out of all. Boom. Questions?
Yeah. A little bit confused. What's the point in mentioning that Yitzchak's names mean laughter within bittul? What's the point of mentioning that?
It's not the bittul specifically, it's the outcome of bittul. Because bittul ultimately leads to joy. If I'm bottled, why would I be bottled? I'm bottled because I recognize Hashem. I recognize, whoa, I'm nothing. And then it's like, whoa, if I'm nothing and Hashem is everything, and Hashem bothered to create me and make me exist and make me get up in the morning, that's a pretty big statement of Hashem's need for me and Hashem's belief in me. And that's going to make us feel pride in that which we live for and the reason that we're here and the God that placed us here and the purpose that we have, which is going to lead to joy and it's going to lead to laughter. And the joy that we experience as a result of bittul will actually be way deeper and more real and more existentially satisfying than a joy that comes just from a joyful approach without the bittul and the fear. So Yitzchak, who was fear, ultimately got to have the hardest laugh of all. Right? He who laughs last laughs hardest. Maybe what we could say is, he who laughs after bittul laughs hardest. Make sense?